my suggestion would be, especially for some of the more complex transportation projects that the state is having, is the municipalities should be having more public outreach to get more people involved. So I just don't want to see any requirements removed for public notification. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person on the list would be Representative Chairman Roberts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would first like to state that I don't know why this meeting was scheduled for this time, because obviously this is the Christmas season. People are busy with festivities. This is the most inopportune time for anybody to show up and present their concerns. So I was hoping that this meeting would be postponed, but of course that my email was not answered today as of yet. So as of today. So my request is that going forward, we schedule these meetings for a more appropriate time, because I think 5 days before Christmas is very inappropriate for the public, and it's unfair because they are the taxpayers, and being the taxpayers, they should have time to examine what's going on and attend the meetings and have a chance to have their say in what goes on. So that said, I think that's it. I just haven't had a chance to really review what you guys are proposing to change. But what I did see, definitely there was many things to be concerned about, I think, for the public. So I think if we could just reschedule this for a more convenient time, perhaps in January when session starts, to give more people a chance to be here for the meeting, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm sure that the public would, because as I said, they are the taxpayers, and I think that they deserve that opportunity. And I don't think that we should attempt to, at least I'm not saying that you are, but it could appear to some people that you're attempting to just impose your own wishes and just restrict their ability to have an input in the process. So if you could just take that into consideration and get back to me on that information, maybe with the chairman who could respond to my email, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
The next person on the list, Eugenia Marks. Ms. Marks. Ms. Marks, did you need your written testimony?
No, I got it.
Okay.
So I don't know whether you want me to read it into the record, or
That's up to you. I mean, we have your written comments that we reviewed and considered.
okay, well, I'll just then speak from my knowledge. I've been involved in transportation planning and other environmental issues for more than 35 years. And I understand the TIP process. I understand that government is always looking to streamline because of constraints of budget and time. But I think we need to have more promotion of providing the budget so that there is the time for adequate planning. You all are professionals and you know the value of time for adequate planning. The other point I've made here is that public comment should not be cut back, particularly at the local level, because it's at that municipal level where people understand what the particular problems are. And while people in government are well-meaning, they are in an office. I mean, I was in an office for a number of years. I know how that is. So you need the eyes and ideas of people in the community to point out where there are public benefit needs. I think, as I've said, that the time restraints that you suggested are not in the best interest of public interest, that 10 days is not sufficient to gather advocates together to have a reasonable discussion about the issues and come together with their own ideas to present to the public. I think that phasing is a good idea because it requires people to plan ahead. And even though it might not turn out that way, at least it gives the planners as well as the public to understand what the complexities of a project are, to know how they are phased in, and what kind of preparations are needed to make that happen. Often, by the time the tip gets to the MPO or the TAC process, it seems like it's a done deal, but there are still opportunities where the public can make comments so that an array of people hears those comments. But I would like for you to clarify what public workshops this rule was intending to eliminate. I've attended those workshops and found them helpful. So one other comment I wanted to make about public participation is that I tried to find the rule on www.planning.ri.gov, and it wasn't apparent to me where it was. It didn't seem to be on the front page. I looked under transportation. I looked under public participation and civil rights, and I couldn't find a title that seemed to make sense to this. So if we're going to have more efficient public participation, we have to have better electronic communication so that people have access to the proposals. So I thank you very much for having this hearing tonight, and I look forward to continued public participation. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next person, Meredith Brady.
Good evening. Meredith Brady, I'm the administrator for planning at the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, and here to voice support for these changes and just give a couple of primary reasons. Number one, we're actually moving from allowing public participation and comment on an every 4-year basis to an every 1-year basis, and we're thankful to the NPO for working with us to establish the annual revisions to the 10-year plan and the 10-year transportation improvement program. This actually ends up giving people more opportunity for comment. Even if you look at the public comment period being shortened, if you look at the cumulative number of days over the 4-year period, you actually have more opportunity for comment. And in addition to that, some of the other changes are making it possible for us to do these 1-year updates. We don't have the staff available to spend 12 months a year doing the updates, so shortening it to a 6-month period is critical for us to be able to still work on outreaching to the communities and finding out what the local priorities are, which is a priority of my office. So I thank you very much.
Barry Schiller.
Good evening, everyone. As you said, my name is Barry Schiller. I've been involved in transportation planning. I was on the TAC for many years. For a while, for 5 years, I was on the board of the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. And I've been for many years, I was the state transportation chair of the Sierra Club, one of the environmental groups. And I see this as a reduction, in spite of what Wright said, I see this as a reduction in public participation. And I think it's a bad idea both politically and substantively. First of all, it's a bad idea politically for the public to perceive of reduced opportunity to influence such an important subject. The public is cynical enough about Rhode Island government and the bureaucracy without adding fuel to that fire. When if you look at what was posted on Go Local about this, about how the public reacts to what they see here, you'll see it's very negative. I think it's a problem in Rhode Island that we have when state government wants to do something good, that immediately they run into that cynicism and makes it more difficult. This feeds it. Bad idea. I think it's also a bad idea substantively. First of all, we need to, and I've always been an advocate. On the RIPTA board, I was one of the people who got public comment at the beginning of every board meeting. On the TAC, I often defended public comment both before and after, as Jared knows. Not everybody wants to hear from the public. I'm sorry they feel it's a burden, but I think it's important. And I think that the recent 610 discussion shows you that. Rideout wanted to just rebuild in place without considering the neighborhoods or the possibility of improved connections between them and possibility of improving that missing link. Because of the public opposition to just rebuilding it as it is, there's a much better plan now, with bike facilities, with the missing link put in, with neighborhoods a little bit better connected. That's because of the public, and we need that. And there's a whole lot of examples. The public had no role in the behind-the-scenes thing for Citizens Bank to come up with a new interchange on 295 to promote sprawl and undermine our land use planning. The public had no say in Tiger Grant proposals for that ridiculous Hopkinton travel bus hub when there's only 3 buses a day each way in a bus hub. We didn't get a chance to have public comments on these Tiger Grant things. Public had no opportunity to weigh in on the Tiger Grant to move the Pawtucket bus hub out of central Pawtucket, where people want to go, to a relatively remote location at the edge, desolate edge of downtown. We need public input, especially bus riders who are not on the TAC or on the State Planning Council. We need every opportunity, same for pedestrian interest. There's no organized pedestrian interest. We need every possible public opportunity. I don't see it so burdensome, the changes. On the local level, I agree with Eugenia Marks. It's really important at the local level that the municipalities go before their constituents to tell us what we're proposing and give us a chance to respond. In North Providence, where I live, we did that because we have a problem with nobody removing the snow from the sidewalks. And a capital expense of getting snow removal equipment is something that we asked about. Its eligibility in the federal program might be doubtful, but it's a real problem, and the town heard it, and they actually did submit it. If we didn't have a hearing, they never would have thought of that, because the people who do this get reserved parking spots right next to town hall. They're not worried about it. The process of having municipal hearings should actually be improved rather than removed, because that's where the public really should be weighing in, as Eugenia said, because they know the local situation. Now, North Providence is hardly a burden. Our town planner put a notice in the local paper. He was there for a half hour. I don't see why that's such a burden. I'm sorry that somebody, maybe in statewide planning, maybe at RIDOT, maybe in the League of Cities and Towns, feels that it's a burden to do this. But we're the taxpayers, we're the people who use the transportation. We have a right to have input. That's really important, because that's where the projects originate. I also don't think I don't know what this annual thing is going to be like. We haven't done it yet. I do know that the 10-year TIP process that we just had, 30 days it would have been totally inadequate. It was already inadequate. It was, what, 400 pages or thereabouts of this first 10-year thing, and it was really hard to get organized, hard to go through it, hard to get organized for the advocacy groups that are affected to get a handle on it. 30 days, if there's a controversial thing, I could read it within the 30 days, but to get other people interested and round them up and have meetings and discuss it and exchange views and find out more from the staff, that's not enough, at least as it's been in the past. The idea of the TAC having a submission workshop where cities and towns and nonprofits and state agencies come to submit proposals for the TEP. Well, I don't know what it'll be like in 1 year, but it's been really worthwhile for people who, and I was on the TAC, I went to all those workshops. It's really worthwhile to get a picture of what's going on in the state. Not just what my town wants, but what everyone in the state is asking for. Being a TAC member, having that presented publicly was really helpful because I get a sense of where things are. Reading it in some abbreviated version later, that doesn't carry the same weight. And for the public, which is people who are not on the TAC, they'll have no idea what's going on statewide, except maybe some statewide planning brief summary, and that's or a huge online thing, which, as Eugenia said, can be difficult to locate. So I think we should keep that, at least for a while, on this annual review. It turns out not to be needed. We could always err on the side a year, 1 or 2 years, and if it turns out not to be needed, it could be revisited. But at this point, to give it up, I think, would be a mistake. I want to conclude with the idea that I've been around doing this for so long, going back to when I first came to the state in the late 1960s. And in my early years here in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of animosity between RIDOT and local groups. We had a big fight about a proposed I-84, a highway slashing across southern Rhode Island. I think it was called 895. We had big fights about stuff in the East Bay. I think that's all history. A lot of you don't even know we went through that, because I think there's been a shift away from RIDOT knowing what to do and ramming it through. In the last couple of decades, there's been a spirit of we're all in this together. Let's have the participation. Let's have the opportunity for the public to know what RIDOT's doing and have an opportunity to give feedback. The same with RIPTA, by the way. In the old days, they just decreed what they were going to do. Now, as I said, we have public comment at every RIPTA board meeting. And to take a step backward from that is to risk going back to the old days. And as I said, even now, there's projects that would have been better if there was more public hearing and public participation. And therefore, I think for the time being, we should reject all these suggested changes. If we see in the annual updates we don't need quite so much, we could always revisit it. But right now, the public will see it as a step back from public participation, a really bad idea. Thank you.
Don Rhodes?
Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays to everyone here. Being a little new at this, some of the observations I've made that I had coming here tonight have been presented already. The first one I thought of was when having this meeting at this time, when the public, the written comments don't have to be until the 21st of January. 23rd, excuse me. If that's the case, why do we have to have the meeting 4 days before Christmas when we have 3 to 4 weeks after the holidays to go through this? To me, that was a little short-sighted, and it does sometimes give the impression that meetings are held at times which are almost not easy for the public to get to, and it's almost like that's the part of the plan. I've been working 6 years as a volunteer president and lobbyist for the RIPTA Riders Alliance, where our mission statement is to preserve and expand public transportation in Rhode Island. And when I see some of the things that wanted to be cut here, I'm glad Eugenia made the statement that she made about trying to find out the information about this situation tonight, because when I spent the last week trying to do it, I thought it was just me. So, thank you. And so the fact that the public is taken out of the procedures seem to, as I've spent more and more time at the State House, seems to be part of the master plan. And I sort of, when I see that happening, and then I see the proposals and the things put in place, that if the public had been part of the process, a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort would not have been wasted. And I just see that time and time again. I have no particular party affiliation, so I'm not in anybody's, I don't feel that I'm in anybody's pocket. I think I'm fairly objective to things, and I think everybody has good ideas, no matter what party that they're with. Sometimes I feel that the lack of teamwork also is a big problem, and I think that would be the same problem here, where everything is a way of cutting down the amount of input that the public has. I was with Barry when we proposed the snow clearing equipment for North Providence. And I can't imagine why things of that nature, why you wouldn't want the public to know about that. To me, that just, it doesn't really make sense to me. So I'm up here just asking that we rethink some of the steps that are being proposed tonight, and be prepared to have a better reason for them, because so far I haven't been able to find that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Grant Bulgarian? Grant?
Close enough.
Okay.
Good evening, Grant Bulgarian. As you know, I love you guys at Statewide Planning. I've loved you guys since day one. You're my favorite state agency. And so I respect the fact that we have a mantra coming down from the governor's office that we want lean government. I'm a great fan of lean government. And there are so many opportunities to streamline our government and still get the services that we are hoping for and expect from our government. But statewide planning is not the place to do it. You guys have been lean since day one, and that needs to be made, that needs to be communicated to the executive branch of the elected executive branch of government. So when I got this notice in the mail, and thank you very much for mailing these notices out, I was troubled. And I appreciate the fact that you indicated in paragraph 2 the substantive revisions, but what would have been helpful would have been to indicate what the changes were, what the current situation is, so we would understand what the change is. Because the first one says reducing length of notice required prior to a public hearing to 10 days. And I'm saying, boy, 10 days is kind of quick. But what is it currently? Is it 60 days? Well, that seems a little more than necessary. 30 days seems reasonable. But I don't know what it is currently. So I'm saying, from my perspective, 30 days seems reasonable. Number 2, eliminating the requirement for municipal governments to hold a public hearing on projects they intend to submit to the TIP. I agree that that's at the local level. People, Rhode Islanders, if it's longer than 20 minutes, they've got to plan in advance. So they're more apt to come to their city or town and weigh in, and they're more knowledgeable at the local level. So I don't see us doing away with that. However, the TIP process was what, every other year, or every 3 years, every 4 years. And so now we're going to do it we have a 10-year TIP, but we're going to revise it every year. If the definition of lean government has escaped me, this would seem to be in the category of the escaping. When this was proposed, I was saying to myself, this is going to get more complicated and more time-consuming, and sure enough, that's what we're looking at right now, is how to make it less time-consuming. if it ain't broke, don't fix. It seemed that the way we had it before was okay. Now, 4 years to me seemed a little long. I'm comfortable with 3. 10 seems too far in advance, and that's why we need annual updates, because things change. We need to revisit this concept of 10 years with annual revisions. We certainly don't need the cities and towns to hold a public hearing every year. But I would be troubled by saying they don't need to hold a public hearing at all. So perhaps the avenue, as Barry suggested, seeing this is new format for all of us, is tell them they have to hold it every other year. And because presumably not every city and town is going to do an amendment anyway every year. So it would be appropriate for them once every other year to have a public hearing on what they've already submitted, so that people are aware. Because, you know, people are transit, new arrivals to the city and town, not aware of what happened a couple of years ago. So that would be my recommendation on that. Don't do away with the mandatory public hearing. Maybe make it every other year instead of every year. Number 3, phases. My understanding is there are only 3 phases. It's either design, what is it, planning, design, and construction? Are those the 3 phases? I don't see why that's so troubling to include it in there, because at least we know where we are in the continuum. I don't see that that's more time consuming. I don't see that that's more burdensome. I don't see that that contributes to a leaner government by eliminating it. The only thing, I guess, is that if things get delayed or things get moved up, then it has to be indicated. That's a good thing. Let us all stay informed. The workshops. I was on the original TAC, and there was no such thing. So I can only go by what Barry had to say, and that's that he felt those workshops were worthwhile. Now, obviously, you don't have to hold a workshop every year, but to not hold a workshop except once every 10 years, that seems kind of far-fetched again. And again, I'm not sure what this is referring to. Is this saying that currently you would have to hold a workshop every year for anyone who wants to, any city or town who wants to bring an amendment? Or are you saying that you wouldn't hold the workshop except once a decade, because that's when the tip is going to be reviewed? Either one of those seems extreme. As my mom would say, everything in moderation. And it would seem that number 4 needs to be in that category. And so I would say, again, I'm an every other year kind of guy. Now, I noticed that there's no number 5. Unless there is a number 5 and it just didn't make it into the paragraph, but if there's no number 5, then we'll mosey on to number 6. And again, is the 30 days seems a reasonable time frame to me, unless it's on the once every 10 year tip, which doesn't seem enough time at all. I agree with Barry. But we certainly don't need 30 days. 30 days is a reasonable time frame on an annual basis. The tip is not supposed to be a 12-month, round-the-clock, by the time you finish it, it's time to start it again process. So I agree with keeping it to a 6-month time frame annually. Even that seems longer than necessary. But that's because we've changed from the way we used to do it to what we're proposing to do it now. So I'm concerned. What would be instructive would be how much time was spent on the tip process when it was once every 4 years, and versus how much time is projected to be spent on the tip process as it is current, once every 10 years with the annual updates. If we're looking to be in government, it'd be instructive to know what that comparison is. Anyway, good luck to you, and as you can understand, if we're going to err on one side or the other, I would err on the side of greater public participation, not less, greater opportunities for the public to participate, and also within a reasonable workload for statewide planning, because you're underfunded, you're under budgeted, and if you're already down to skin and bones, this is not where you get leaner. You get leaner in many other areas of state government. And so I thank you for your time. Good luck.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to present comments? You can just state your name.
My name is actually on the list, and I wasn't going to speak. Sharon Steele, Vice President of the Jewelry District Association and President of Building Bridges Providence. I am not going to bother to repeat a lot of the comments of people who have spoken, but just to perhaps do a little quick reel of highlights. Having this week was probably not a great idea. As Grant indicated, if the notice had said what it is now versus what we're trying to make it, it would have been exceedingly helpful. If you look at the audience, most of us have been around for a very long time. If you would like to bring millennials and people who really are going to be intimately responsible for and answerable to what's happening in transportation in particular, I think you need to find a better time. Those people have young families, and this is not a particularly good time for that to happen. I will say that my personal experience with DOT is that the last thing I want right now is less communication and less collaboration. Some of the problems that we are having today is a direct result of the fact that we have had not enough of either of those things. So having been involved in the pedestrian bridge a long and painful 10 years and getting it to happen, followed by, shall we say, lots of other transportation projects. The 610 connector, I think, is a particularly salient one because it is a better plan today, and that, like many of the improvements we've made of late, have been grassroots efforts, bottom up. They take time, and as you all well know, if there is not an advocate for something in this town, it just doesn't happen, or it gets, shall we say, placed on the bottom of the list. And last but not least, I'm now involved in the Gano Street Gateway, yet another project that went off track, for lack of a better word. So we are collaborating and trying to get it back on track. So my assessment at this point with respect to DOT in particular is I do not want to see any reduction in any public process. If anything, I want more of those things, and I want them easier and better communication and better use of social media. And thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else that would like to present comments, either in oral or written comments at this time? Sure. Step right up to the podium, please.
Thank you. My name is Chris Warren. I live in Providence. And quite by accident, I spotted the poster on the ceiling support over here in this building when I was here on other business. And I can't really add to any of the comments that have been made. They were all great. The only thing that I would like to add a little bit is the social media aspect and publicity, different media channels. I confess, I gather my news in sort of a haphazard way, and I'm always on alert to find more efficient ways of gathering my news and getting good news. And it was really pure chance that I spotted this notice, and I made it my business to be here tonight. I live in Providence and I work in East Providence, and I had to come all the way back this way after stopping at home. So more publicity, different channels. Thank you very much.
Any other oral comments, written comments? comments at this time? Definitely, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We definitely appreciate all your comments and questions. I think that some of your questions can be answered informally by the Division of Planning, where to locate certain documents and items. Also, I should note that there were many notices that were sent out regarding today's hearing and the public comment in general. And there's a list that's kept by the Division of Planning. So if anybody's interested in getting future notices of hearings, you may want to get on the list, and you can talk to either Prague or Jared to do that. Again, as I stated previously, the written comment period is open till January 23rd. We definitely appreciate all your oral comments today. If you want to further or supplement those comments, under the Administrative Procedures Act, we are required to keep the record open beyond this hearing. So if you wish to submit any additional comments, please do so through writing. The way the process will work from here is that once the comment period is over, the State Planning Council will consider all these written and oral comment submissions regarding the proposed rules. In addition, the comments and any possible changes to the proposed rules, which can still be happened, would be discussed in an open meeting by the State Planning Council. Additionally, any changes and the final regulations would require a vote by the State Planning Council in an open meeting. So that is a public process as well. It sounds like many of you are familiar with it and have been there before. So that's another opportunity to weigh in and be part of that process. When and if the rules are adopted by the State Planning Council, they would then be filed with the Secretary of State, in which case they would become effective 20 days after the filing. So that's sort of how the process goes from here. And that's pretty much it. If there's any other written comments now, I'd be happy to take them. It is now 6:20, and we can conclude today's public hearing, comment hearing. Again, we appreciate all your comments and your time tonight to come in here, especially close to the holidays. And last, I wish you all a happy holiday.